everyone. Thanks for joining us.
Hi.
Our very first end of year wrap up for the podcast to catch up, and I think we're going to be co-branded it with TrendDesk as well. So today we're going to be looking at the 4 big trends that define 2020, and we are joined in no particular order by our brand new head of client services, Mr. James Lees.
Hi, everybody.
Our head of operations, Charlie Gibson.
Hello there.
Our supreme CEO, Mr. Rich Hemsworth.
Hi.
Bit of on a game show.
So what am I supposed to do to that intro?
I think it was a good intro, and our very resident stat man, Calum.
Save the best till last. Thank you very much.
Cool. So we're going to run through it. Calum's going to present a few things that we've seen and probably discussed previously on the podcast as well. So go take it away, Cal. Do it.
So quarter one was, I've named the quarter that set the trends for 2020. And towards the end of the first quarter, we saw the national lockdown, and these trends really did accelerate into Q2. But what we saw within our data was a very different quarter in terms of which categories were growing and what people were purchasing. So it wasn't growth across the board. If you look to the far right of the chart, you'll see that fashion declined. And probably all of this is due in some way to what was happening with the virus. So fashion didn't see any growth, whereas things like home appliances, gaming, animals, kind of sports performance, gardening, home and living were all massive growth categories. When we add in average order value into that as well, it spells a very interesting picture in terms of where were people spending their money. With the news of lockdowns and working from home, we saw people really start to view their homes more than just a place in which they lived, but more as in an office, a gym, a pantry, and where they would spend their whole lives. So things like home and living and home appliances grew massively, and we saw people spend a lot on that when they were trying to adjust to this new lifestyle. Some interesting categories also came to the fore. Things like gardening and accessories, gaming, animals and pets. We discussed on a previous podcast that people either became gardeners or chefs, which is definitely what we saw in the data in terms of where people were spending their money and which categories they were spending them in. So it was a story of growth, and it was a story of different categories seeing kind of growth that they probably would never expect to see.
Probably never
so
see
early on.
As well.
Yeah.
That's, I think, the key thing. So in terms of anecdotally speaking, I'll throw this one over to James, because I know you were doing quite a bit of gardening. How did things start to turn around for you? What sort of things were you focusing on purchase-wise when
Gardening for me?
How did your garden turn around?
What was I buying for my garden? Stones, or like little pebbles to make it look nice, because I'm not much of a planter, but I did buy some nice plants.
Do you get any plum slate?
I got plum slate. Well, we spoke about plum slate on one of the very first podcasts, Rich, if you remember right.
Come full circle.
Yeah, we have. I'll get me school leavers book out soon if you want.
You should say that.
Plum slate, storage boxes, planters and things like that. I did buy a nice cordless Works pressure washer, so you never have to plug it in. You don't even have to connect it to a hose pipe.
How does that even work?
Oh, do you want me to tell you? So,
It's sucking moisture out the air.
Not quite. So what you will do, you'll go to you go to your tap, kitchen tap, other taps are available. You'll put your wee bucket, which is a collapsible bucket as well, by the way, so for storage is fantastic. You get your collapsible bucket, fill that with water, then you got like a little pipe which runs from the pressure washer to the bucket, press the button, sprays away, and that's run by a battery charger, 20-volt battery charger thing.
Would you have bought that previously?
Not a chance, mate. It would not have been on my radar.
All right, okay. So when you started, I mean, were you a gardener previously, or was this
Nah.
something that?
No, I've got a guy who comes to my house every 2 weeks, pay him 20 quid, and he mows me front and back lawn.
Did you stop paying him during that period?
No, of course I didn't, mate. I'm not going to cut my own grass, am I? I've done well for myself.
So what were you? He was cutting your grass, and you were putting the slate down around him, essentially.
I put the slate around him, mate. I was planting around him. He used to come round every couple of weeks. Oh, there's some nice new plants you put down, James. Oh, thank you very much, Derek.
Is it something you're going to carry on doing, though?
Absolutely not, mate. No.
Yeah, at all. So it's not.
No, the pressure wasn't been used for ages.
I think that's what's
There is that shift in trend then back away from this whole lockdown activity, isn't there?
That's the thing. Like, what is going to be kept up? Is this some growth that is pretty unprecedented, and then nobody's going to see again?
I think so. Like people like they're going to try painting themselves instead of getting a paint and decorator in. Like I say, you got people like myself who never even considered gardening before, gave it a go. I became quite the expert in flat pack. I enjoyed framing pictures, all sorts of stuff. But I have no intentions of once we get some relative normality to ever do any of that activity again.
I think it's
I
worked
think
almost
that's
like
the full circle.
it's almost worked a bit like an introduction to a whole load of new things. So
Yeah.
it's almost like join the gym in January. So 100 people will join the gym in January. By March, about 10 are left. So it'll be similar with this. So 100 people getting to get gardening or online gaming or whatever it might be, or cooking, that type of thing.
Yeah.
And then you'll have people that just drift away from it. But all those sectors will have grown because you will have people where they've just they carry on. There's a number that will carry on and maintain.
Yeah.
About to say there, Charlie.
I think everyone's done the full loop. I think we've experienced, I've tried to be a chef, a gardener, yoga, expertise, everything like that, and, decorator as well. But I think we now know we've either got a new hobby, we know what to leave to the experts as well. So there's loads of people I know who, invested in a bread maker, everything like this for the banana breads and everything like that, and all of the, all the utensils, and now they're just like, yeah, don't think I'll use that again, gathering dust in the cupboard, but you never know. There's all the uncertainty, so at least it's there for a rainy day.
Yeah, so for me, like, I reckon, just again, seeing how sort of my habits have changed, seeing how sort of my friends' families' habits have changed. I think for me, I can definitely see the gaming sort of vertical carrying on with what it's been doing, especially with the sort of non-hobbyist gamers previously. I think we were talking about it last night, Rich, where there's sort of a lot more of the free-to-play games where it's picking up sort of in-app spending, that type of thing.
Yes.
So are there any other these verticals that people think are going to do well off this and carry on the growth, or do you reckon it's been a flash in the pan for the majority?
I think there'll be a few that are a flash. Well, like I say, I think all of them will maintain a level of, like the onboarded customers kind of thing, and they'll maintain to a level. But I think your biggest ones to suffer are going to be your kind of, almost these kind of local takeout kind of, people doing cakes, doing that. I think they'll be the first ones to fall away because I think it's just too easy to do a big shop and things like that. And people are taking less. It's almost like you had that time on your hands under lockdown. You had that time to have put more care and attention into something. As life speeds up again, people have less time to kind of appreciate these little things. So I think they go by the wayside.
I think interesting point, something we've talked about a lot within TrendDesk and within Salesfire is e-commerce and people buying used goods. And there's a trend of that growing. And if we say that these categories have grown, but maybe a flash in the pan, maybe like you, James, you've tried gardening, it's not for you, but you've got the equipment. Maybe e-commerce is going to be massive in 21 because of that.
I think eBay might have a pickup. Yeah, you'd expect a lot of things to be appearing on Gumtree.
Yeah. Used once between March and April.
Yeah. It was home gyms.
So, I mean, this feeds in. We discussed a lot on the podcast in the early days. I mean, it's nearly a year ago now when we were going through it. The subscription services. It's funny what you touched on there, James, with your gardener. So you literally, you were still doing extra on top, but you never cancelled that.
Yeah.
So you're a subscription man as well. Is there anything that you're going to be cancelling? Are there things that are going to be you're not going to be carrying on with, or is it something that
No.
you're along?
No, so I have a few subscription things that still come through. I didn't cancel any of them. So the main two I've got, one's actually been delivered to my house this morning. It's one called the Gusta Box, which basically is a theme every month of different snacks and treats. Like you pay 13 quid a month, and there's just those different stuff. It's a nice surprise. Like the young one enjoys it, and I do, and like Kelly does. It's like it's sound. And you've got to feel like daft little spice ones for cooking and stuff like that, because I cooked before lockdown anyway. So for me, like, no, I didn't get any alcohol subscription ones because Aldi was still open.
Yeah, true.
It's like it was like less than a mile away from your house. So yeah, because that's still like that was like in early lockdown. Okay, I didn't go to a shop probably for the first 4 weeks. But after you kind of got the confidence of doing it, you didn't mind just having to drive down to your local Aldi because it's the one opportunity you really get to get out of your house.
Yeah, so the thing you go to or you're sticking with, essentially.
Yeah, I think Calum, you mentioned about sports and outdoor. There's a lot of kind of, I think, in terms of subscriptions as well, a lot of them, people have experienced classes or kind of, exercise classes essentially that, maybe are based, down south or maybe not in the northeast that have, been attending like, all over the world. Like there's some classes I was experiencing on like a Saturday where people from London, they were outside the UK, they've joined a membership now and they wouldn't have experienced or even in their region being able to do that class. So I think that's like, I think that's been a great thing. And I think it's something where, when lockdown eased and people were able to go back in the gyms or studios, they've had the option now, what they prefer. Maybe they haven't, been able to attend a certain time, maybe 5 o'clock just after work. But if they've been working from home, they're able to do that now. So it's definitely more flexible with the subscriptions.
It's almost the same as what we're seeing with remote working. People are able to sort of source expertise from places that would never culturally sort of be viable. Especially, I mean, we're sort of seeing that with some of the things we're looking at now. We're able to connect and work with people that are in sort of more bustling places of industry, if that makes sense. I know you are not the biggest fan of the subscription service, Rich. Is this going to? Did you ever get any closer to getting on the board with it all or not?
No.
Since we last talked.
That was a constant debate on this podcast. It's just that it won't last.
So, folks, I found myself cancelling a few. So there was a point where it's like, it's only £6, it's only £7. And then I got my, I was looking at my funds at the end of the year, and it's like the holes I put in the bucket in my bank account with all of these little subscriptions.
Yeah,
crazy. It's mental, really. I had to cancel everything.
What do you think, slightly on a side point here, what do you think is going to happen to the likes of like Zoom and things, where obviously they've onboarded like crazy over lockdown? The share prices went through the roof. The values of these companies went crazy. I'm wondering what will happen with them, because they must have a huge fall away from what they did have. There must be so many users that are leaving that.
Like the people buying garden equipment rose to a level. Will that be the same next year? No, but still those people will continue it. So some companies have adapted, went to more home work, and then they ever have done previously. So I think Zoom will
They'll be higher than what they were, won't they? It's like this thing we're describing here, where they'll have onboarded new customers, then so many will leave. So the likes of Zoom, I'm guessing, yes, they'll have grown more than what they would have, but there must be a point where there's a huge kind of peak in users and subscriptions that's fallen away a bit.
Yeah, what will do. Based on 2019, it'd be much higher, but yeah, based on 2020, probably much less.
Yeah.
Based on the emails I've been getting from, they've been offering pretty deep discounts to sign people up on yearly contracts as well.
Have they?
Well, not contracts, but yearly subscriptions. Yeah, from the emails I've been receiving, which is a smart thing on their part. I mean, you've got people who aren't necessarily going to need the service as much in 6 months' time. Sign them up for 12 months and see what you can do at that point. But this leads quite neatly on to Q2 as well, I feel. Everything, like all the smaller companies and everyone trying to get online. Now we're going Q2 there.
Yeah, so moving into Q2 and the quarter where commerce went online, really. If we look at a chart from the Office of National Statistics, which show the percentage of all retail sales that were through e-commerce, we can go back to like 2006 there. And what we've got on this chart is looking from 2015 to 2020, so the last 5 years. And we've seen a steady growth, but in Q2 2020, the growth went to about a third. So 1 in 3 of all sales were made online, which is a massive jump, and a 70% rise from where that was in Q2 2019. So obviously driven by major lockdowns, people having to shop online, and bricks and mortar closing. But that level of growth was so huge, and it does beg the question: will it stay at that level? Obviously, it'll come down as bricks and mortar reopen. But has this been the kind of turning point for e-commerce? It was always rising, and it was always chipping at bricks and mortar, but now it's had a opportunity like no other, really, to get everyone online. And what we saw was brands that were mature to e-commerce and were ready for that really benefited. Brands that weren't fell apart. So, those underdogs at Amazon had a incredible series of events because they had that infrastructure ready to deal with all that traffic. And what we saw as well in terms of search demand is things growing that we would never see in a normal year. So in Q2, things like delivery driver jobs and Royal Mail jobs were massively searched for. Again, showing this trend of, well, everyone's shopping online, people are getting more and more deliveries, and also coupled with the fact of the country going into a furlough scheme, and lots of people losing their usual jobs. So that was really interesting to see from Google in terms of what people were searching for, and how that all linked in with what was happening in a kind of societal and political landscape.
I think the death of the high street, I know it's a cliche term at this point, but sped things up a lot. But I honestly have found myself going back to the shops. I don't know if anyone else has, but as soon as I got the chance to go back out, I have fallen away with my online grocery shopping, for instance. Don't do that anymore at all. The things I'm getting on Amazon, I've stopped doing. I'm trying to get out of the shop as much as I can as soon as we finish this lockdown. Do we think that it's caused the impact that everybody's saying it has, or do you reckon there's still time for the high street yet? I'll go to Charlie with that one.
Yeah, I think in terms of the high street, I think a lot of online shopping, a lot of us do it anyway in terms of browsing and searching for particular items. But I think for me, earlier on in October, I think it was, when we went through the webinar for empathy, was more kind of what people are used to shopping in store. So the flexibility of returns, that's increased with different returns methods. I think people now have started using those, return loggers. It's just ease of access. But I think the one thing with something I was reading is more people have missed, that the buying experience of trying stuff on, and kind of that increase in average order value that you mentioned there. People are buying probably more in terms of that actually can't see and feel the product while they're in the store. So I think that's been kind of a key thing for people, especially for the gift buying season that we're in now as well. I think, people want to actually see the product before, if it's a big ticket item, anything like that. So I think for me, people probably really wanted to go in. I think it's probably certain industries, kind of from the tech side and, TVs, for Currys, we were there last week and buying a new phone, and the queues were huge, but it was more gift buying rather than treating themselves.
So from an infrastructure perspective, James, I know you discussed this previously on a podcast. How do you think this is going to change how people are set up? Do you think we're going to now see sort of warehouses losing a lot of what they were getting put through from the smaller retailers, the ones that were shifted online? Or do you reckon we're seeing sort of the DHL driver several times coming up a road all day long that we've never really seen before.
I think it's going to be a mixed bag. Like Charlie said, like there's still going to be that need for this kind of high street experience. Now, I know like in fashion in particular, they're seeing a huge increase in return rates as well, haven't they? Because average order,
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
no, you're going to, let's say you're going to buy a top in 3 different colours maybe because you know which one's going to suit you best. But again, maybe people don't like the experience, don't like the returning process and things like that. So you start seeing them people go back to the high street. But I think it's hard to predict. If I'm being brutally honest, like myself, I've generally been an online shop when it comes to stuff like clothes and things like that, just because I've worked in the industry, so I like how it works. It suits me better. I don't like walking through the high street trying clothes on, stuff like that. But again, everyone's different. I think there will be, once, use the term back to normal, you will see the percentage of people online now will be higher, but there's going to be still, like Rich said, it's like you'll see that massive jump of people doing it. There'll be that life, and some will return back to the older ways, but still the percentage of people doing online will be high. So the high street will be affected long term because of it. But I think they need to adapt. I mean, there's loads of talks in regards to making high street stores smaller and being it kind of like more like a try it on personal shopper experience, and then getting the product posted out to you, like that kind of thing. I think that's probably where the high street needs to adapt. Instead, like you go to Middlesbrough, you got that giant House of Fraser building, giant Debenhams building, giant Site building. Do they need to be that big? Absolutely not. No, like trying to you kind of reach products. Go and have that try-on experience. Talk to somebody, get kind of like a retail experience, a personal shopper experience per se, and then get your products like posted into store or posted direct to your house. That would be a good way for the high street kind of adapt in that instance, rather than just having rails and rails of clothes.
You'd think with someone like Debenhams, who have been kind of in trouble through this, and some of the other department stores, you'd think that would be the ideal setup going forwards, where it's all kind of concessions, isn't it? Sat within the big building. You'd think that'd be the ideal, but obviously they're the ones that kind of they were first in line to get in trouble. Not just now, but leading up to all of this year.
We have been for a while, haven't they? Let's be honest. Like, we talk with Debenhams going out of business for a long, long time now. House of Fraser obviously had the troubles pre-COVID, and Mr. Ashley came in and bought them. It's so that kind of like huge department store thing has changed. Maybe are we going to see a switch in regards to the high street being a brand concession stand place? So the high street will be a Barber, Fred Perry kind of situation rather than a department store that sells all these brands. I don't know.
Yeah, without naming specific brands, I guess there's certainly been, when we've spoken to brands in the past, they've certainly had a hunger to cut out the middleman, cut out the independent.
Yeah.
And just go direct to retailers.
Yes.
So there could be that. I just don't know what you do with these giant buildings. So you can adapt online, you can adapt, like trends come and go. But when you've got a 200-year-old building in the middle of town, the likes of, some of your Debenhams buildings and the like, I just don't know what you'd really do with them.
Well, I know the Middlesbrough in particular, they're on about changing it to more of like a leisure complex town centre rather than a retail one.
You make it a giant ball pit.
Yeah, just your giant ball pool and a big massive bowling alley. Well, like no, you look at like what your Leeds and Manchester done with your big kind of like, like Leeds Trinity Kitchen when they got loads of independent like food outlets in one place. It's like trying to keep people in the town centre for longer. Then eventually the remaining brands on the high street will do better off the back of that, because you go into town for a bit of food, a couple of drinks. All right, I've had a couple of pints. You know what? I'm a little bit tipsy now. I'm going to buy a top. Yeah. Kind of situation. You're in town anyway, so there's other reasons to pull people in the town centre rather than we've got a massive top shop.
Yeah. So I think
it'd be the food and drink that draws people in, won't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
The leisure element, isn't it? So we've seen a lot of more niche, sort of smaller independents come through with a thirst for sort of personalisation and the sort of the recommendations and that type of thing, and being able to cater for their niches. Do you see any of the bigger dogs like your Debenhams, like the bigger companies that sort of really struggling or have struggled? Are you seeing them get in front of this and sort of get in the vanguard, or do you think this is going to be something that sticks with the niche?
For me, I think one that stands out, I don't think we spoke about it so far, is like the beauty industry. So for me, in terms of your House of Frasers and your Debenhams, there's a lot of the beauty concessions there. And the experience, I guess, for, if you pick the foundation or anything like that, is speaking to an expert, actually, going through what's the right colour, what's the right match, trying it on. There's a lot of brands that I've seen have actually, got a lot more social influencers using them in a different way, through like Insta stories and going through kind of what their routine is day in, day out. So you've had stories about wellness, looking after their skin for a particular problem, highlighting kind of the product descriptions on there and kind of changing their website based on that. So I think it's been quite nice to that one, especially people wearing less makeup, if they're trying to give their skin time, for the month. So I think for me, that's going to be very interesting once the shop's open, how people are actually going to use those beauty concessions moving forward.
Yeah, I think this plays into what the trend we're going to be putting forward for Q3 as well, which is how people were trying to sort of repair local commerce and local damage. Cal's got some stats here. Do you want to go through them, Cal, quick?
Yeah, sure. Let's move on.
Particularly the top 5 rising searches there. They're pretty interesting.
Yeah, the quarter where people did try and repair that local damage, and you see that in the data. When we moved into Q3, and it seemed like the government thought COVID went away for a few months, so they chucked everyone back into like local hospitality for Eat Out to help out, and basically pushed everyone to help their local community, which was a great trend to see after that rise in e-commerce. And we saw, this is from the ACS, in that quarter, some of the top convenience store searches were like local shop near me, local farm shop, does the local shop do delivery, and hopefully we see that kind of trend. I personally would like to see it and continue into 2021. We saw actual businesses, local businesses saw that they had a positive impact in terms of sales and an average order value, average basket spend in Q3, and I would say that was a kind of antidote to having to be stuck indoors. You said it there, Josh. As soon as you were allowed out, people saw the damage it was creating to the local community, to these small businesses, and hopefully kind of thought, well, Amazon have done well enough. Let's kind of try and support the local bookshop or the local convenience store, the local kind of bakery. So I think that was definitely a trend we saw in Q3, and one that I'd like to think that once we start coming out of these lockdowns, is something that is here to stay.
So we've seen sort of big pushes from the reviews companies, haven't we? Like reviews.io and sort of even Google as well have been pushing their reviews for local businesses. Is sort of, as we see more of these niche sellers go online, do you think reviews are going to be more important next year? Do you think we're going to be seeing a lot more of these review platforms getting out there and sort of disrupting things a little bit? I'll throw that one to James. I know you've worked with reviews in the past quite a bit.
What do you mean in regards to like the different way reviews will be collected in that respect?
Yeah, like sort of the innovations that people seem to be making at the minute, like especially with some of reviews.io when they're taking video reviews now, that type of thing. It will be a lot more important to people going forward.
I think so. I think people will maybe consider a few other elements in regards to how to purchase now, because I don't think Amazon got great press through lockdown, and rightly so. So a lot of people like looking at the searches there, people looking for more localized things. There's been a lot of stuff from in Teesside in particular where people are trying to promote more independent retailers, whether they be e-commerce or bricks and mortar. So I think the reviews element of things will become more important because people will be considering the purchase more, and do the smaller independents need to work harder on that? I think they do, yeah.
So in regards to sort of the social proofing, are we seeing, because before social proofing, what it was a Facebook page, it was a few comments on Instagram. Do you think we're going to be seeing that rolled into sort of business plans moving forward and sort of how products are developed?
I think it has to be, yeah.
Yeah. I think definitely. I think in terms of that reviews, like you were saying there, Josh, in terms of the it's like the communities and I think neighbourhoods as well. When people were struggling for delivery slots, we're experimenting with different supermarkets that we've never used before. But also from the local shops, it's kind of your word of mouth or Facebook groups that people were using for recommendations. and the experiences and, you know, why they've used them. I think a lot of people were relying on that as well. So I think reviews is definitely going to be a key part, especially if they've never heard of them before.
Yeah.
And it's something, you know, it's kind of that fear of trying something new. You don't know what the quality is going to be like or the customer service, but I think a lot of people have just had to jump in with both feet, and kind of we didn't have a choice, you know, back in Q2.
I know it's something we made a big push on with our clients, and we were trying to communicate across the sort of, especially with our managed service side of things. But empathy was a huge thing in Q3 as well. I mean, the way people were managing the comms and the way they were sort of managing their marketing mix and things like that. How important was sort of empathy to sort of, well, should always be important, but how much of a difference did it make in Q3?
Yes, I think, you know, a lot of people, you know, in terms of customer service online, it was kind of more, you know, people have been, you know, unfortunately, some have been aggressive with kind of the stock, you know, kind of fearing people of how much stock they've got left and they should get it in case they do run out. I think for me, you know, I went on about it in the webinar, it's time to flip that script. It's review your current strategy of customer service and how you utilize it and support them. You know, what are they thinking and feeling at that time? There's been so much, you know, uncertainty. I know that's another word that a lot of people, one of the keywords for 2020, but, you know, for us, we don't really know. We don't really know what they're thinking or feeling and what situation they're in. So you can see the content in the different ways they utilize and experience. You know, there's some brands that have, you know, switched their customer service from phones to chat online.
Yeah.
People are more shopping online to kind of the categories. They're not really sure, you know, they're normally visiting a high street store. And a lot of those are just needing this a little bit of support and a little bit of recommendations of kind of the direction they should go in. And I think for empathy, you know, we've seen a lot of campaigns before previously, especially in the gift industry, in the card industry, where you can opt out in certain ones. So I think for me, it's always been a big thing, but I think it's been highlighted massively in retail this year. And I think it should always be a core part of your content strategy, especially moving into 2021.
Yeah, I think everyone's been guilty a little bit of not listening to sort of what people are actually saying when it comes to that type of thing. I think that ties quite nicely into the reviews, but it also ties quite nicely into one of the big trends we saw in Q4. And that was us not really seeing the significance of Singles Day. I think, have you got the stats there, Carl?
Yeah, so Q4, the quarter that changed November forever. Basically, what we saw when Q4 happened and more, the second lockdown happened, so all that lovely empathy stuff and helping out local communities kind of started to go back over itself as it did in Q2. And what we saw was a November that in 2020 was bigger every day than Black Friday was in 2019. And not only did we see a rise in commerce, we saw an obvious rise on Black Friday, which you would always expect to see. But then it was kind of like a two-pronged peak, really, where we saw a massive growth on the 11th of November, which when we kind of studied where that came from, it was on Singles Day. Now, what we've started to learn here at Salesfire, and especially with TrendDesk, is sometimes the initial start, the initial insight, the initial peak doesn't tell the whole story. And what we then found out when we looked into a specific category, we saw that, for example, clothing and accessories was huge on Singles Day and accounted for nearly half of every sale that day in terms of our e-commerce tracking. So that's when we kind of start looking around at other categories. Did we also see a peak? No, we didn't. Not on Singles Day. Things like health and beauty or gaming or home and living weren't huge on Singles Day. They had their peaks as expected on Black Friday, but what we learned here was if you're in that clothing space, then this day is nearly as important to you as Black Friday. And with it being new and not as mature, it's a real strong opportunity.
Yeah, so we're looking at a cultural shift, really, aren't we, in how people are buying and where they're buying in regards to the fashion.
Yeah.
So I'll throw this to you, Rich. One, are you going to be waiting for Singles Day next year to read through your wardrobe? And two, is it something that people need to start looking into in regards to strategy? Or do you think it's a tad too early to pull the trigger on it?
Well, I think so, because if people are, what tends to happen on all these dates, well, there's no tens about it, it does happen. Conversion rates go up. So your conversion rates go up in multiples usually on Black Friday. So basically the traffic you're paying for is more likely to convert. So these key dates when people they tend to be browsing on the build up. So what you'll see in the weeks running up to these things, they'll actually browse. They'll then execute and kind of purchase on that specific date. So yes, it makes absolute sense kind of doing something. And the thing is, you don't have to go crazy with offers. You haven't got to go 30% off everything on your site. You've just got to be kind of partaking in it. So, I mean, I get offers through from, it's like Boohoo Man newsletter, and it's saying up to 70% off. Now they do it to the extreme, which is you see through after a couple of visits to the site, you kind of see through it fairly quickly. You'll go on there and there'll be a few things that are 70% off, and then everything kind of tears down in terms of discount. It's just usually the stuff they can't get rid of that's the higher discount. Not doing it to that extreme, but at the same time, you haven't got to go in with huge discounts, as long as you're partaking and communicating to your customer base that you're partaking in that day, kind of thing.
Yeah.
But you've seen it before. We know that, like, we're starting to see a kind of a new trend as well with a few sites whereby they actually shut up shop in the couple of days before Black Friday, and they just collect newsletters, and they don't really dispatch anything. They're just waiting for that day or that kind of that sale to come live, and because they know full well everyone's browsing, no one's purchasing. So it's quite important in the build up to these days. That's probably where Singles Day people haven't really done it. Black Friday's been around for quite a few years. So you've got this kind of mentality of people browsing in the build up and then starting to execute and purchase. Whereas Singles Day haven't. It's just happened as this kind of one spike, which is kind of what Black Friday was 7 or 8 years ago, really, I think.
It's a tough one as well, because I think people also fall into the trap of looking at the marketing calendar and going, right, there's this day. Because if you Google it, there's an anniversary or a celebration day for everything. There's like World Pen Day or one day. There's like World Shoe Day the next. You know what I mean? It's sort of finding those next ones and which ones are going to be
You just got to pick out things that aren't ridiculous, really.
Yeah.
I
think it's all
that's where I get cynical towards some of these marketing companies, where they'll be celebrating National Hugs Week or something like that, and saying you sell doors, so therefore you need to celebrate National Hugs Week or something ridiculous like that. You know, as long as you've just got to make them. That's an extreme example, obviously, but I have seen Valentine's Day offers and doorknobs.
Wow.
So yeah,
take it a few different ways, couldn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, just as long as they've got to tie in, you know. It's like that thing, if everything's on sale and everything's you're highlighting every day, then no day is special, really.
Well, it's one of those things, though, as well, isn't it? Would we have potentially said that about Singles Day at one point when we were looking at those calendars?
Yeah, probably.
That's
a bit different. That's like a cultural shift, isn't it? Where I think a lot of you've got a kind of like a growing Chinese population in universities and colleges and things. A lot more people who have settled over here, kind of thing, and kind of bring with it these types of trends.
Your pent up demand for fashion and clothing throughout the year as well. So
that's it. Yeah, you're right there. Yeah, like obviously fashion was one of the ones that suffered. I think activewear went through the roof, but actual fashion where people stuck in. There weren't. You're right. It's coincided with everyone coming out of this state and then refreshing the wardrobe, I think.
How do people going about get ahead of it? How obviously you don't want to be waiting to people maybe might have missed the boat with it this year, but there's obviously going to be some people who've capitalised on it.
Well, that it sounded like a cheap plug, but we'll carry on. Start working with an agency or someone who's got eyes on everything, because what tends to happen, we've mentioned it before, e-commerce companies tend to have their eyes on what they're doing.
Mhm.
They'll be looking at their rival, usually picking up on things that the rival's doing blind, and it turns into a scenario of blind leading the blind.
Yeah.
But agencies that are fairly well established should have figures on years and years gone by, and figures and trends across multiple industries and multiple clients, like hundreds of clients potentially.
Yeah.
So that's the only opportunity where you're going to get that kind of true voice, that true sense of what's happening going forwards. So
Yeah.
kind of tying into those, really, it's kind of why we've launched that TrendDesk, really, because it gives people the ability to kind of get some insight into what the market's doing there and then. It's all right kind of picking up on some of these. I mean, you've seen a lot of things off Black Friday. A lot of stats are coming out now to do with Black Friday. Me as a retailer, great. That was weeks ago. Like,
Exactly. Yeah.
let me know on the build up next time, please. You know, it's this kind of it's almost this requirement for a little bit more live stats and bit of insight before the events, really, that I think are required.
Yeah, I think it's important that they're actionable as well. I think that's what we try to do with TrendDesk, is that the stats are quite chunky in a sense. You can take them away, and you don't need a data scientist to break them down and work out a strategy for it from you. You can look at a line graph and go, right, this is going up. Let's get something up and running.
I think we're still stuck in an environment where, and we saw it in the run up to Black Friday, where people go, "I'm just going to wait and see."
Yeah.
You know, like, I'll just see what so and so does down the road, and I'll see what offers they put on. I'll just match whatever offers they're doing. And really, you've seen the graph there. You see the build of sales in the weeks before. You see the amount of, we haven't got the visitors stats here, but the spikes in visitors were ridiculous in the page sessions. Like, because people are doing the browsing in the run up. So if you're not part of that, and you're just sitting there waiting for Joe Blogs down the road to put their sale on, and you'll copy his 20% sale, you've missed the boat completely.
Yeah, I think it's when you went back to kind of, capturing the email data or capturing information is more for this Q4 activity. It's more data capture for Q3, so kind of acquiring them, and then that behavior and learning, what's their preferences, what are the browsing on your site, and more, rather this batch and blast email process, or just one discount fits all, is personalize it, tailor it based on what the shop's done previously. And if you've captured, if they're buying for a gift or a particular brand, people think, oh, it's too much work in the detail. You don't have to go so far into personalization. It's just more what experience they've had with you, and what you think is going to help them convert.
Yeah, awesome. Right, I think we're at time now. I think we're going to leave it. Thanks everyone for joining us. Going to go around the table quickly. James, biggest trend next year, 2021.
Biggest trend next year. Honestly, I think just based on we've just been touched on there, I think it's the for these clothing retailers and brands to be thought leaders for Singles Day. I think just because of it kind of came as a relative unknown, and it was a shock to us suddenly seeing the numbers coming through. I think the retailer and brands that are really on song will become that thought leader for Singles Day moving forward. So I'm excited to see that trend next year.
Cool.
Yeah.
I'm gonna put my prediction in. I think the high streets have gone through the 12th round with Deontay Wilder. They've been knocked out, but they're going to get up like Tyson Fury and fight back and end up winning 2021. I think that localism trend is going to continue, and people are going to want to build the community around them.
I think no one's going to be in the UK. We're all going on holiday.
Charlie, what's your big one for next year?
I think definitely for Q1's retention. There's new audiences, they've got that they've never experienced before, and especially with Black Friday, the volume of new visitors is, how do you retain them? How do you educate them? How do you inject empathy? Awesome.
Right. Thanks for joining us, guys. I think we'll leave it there. Make sure everyone's following TrendDesk, where we're going to be publishing insights throughout the year. Put a link, I don't know.
Cheers. Bye.